There is an island where bread is baked by burying the dough in black sand and letting the ground cook it for 24 hours, where children swim in outdoor pools while snow settles on their hair, and where, in 2023, an entire fishing town of 3,790 people packed their lives into cars overnight because the earth beneath their streets had begun to open. This is Iceland, one of the most expensive, most peaceful, and most content places on Earth, built directly on top of the crack where two continents are tearing away from each other, about 2 centimeters every year. The people here heat their homes with the volcano's own hot water. They light their cities with its steam. And when it turns on them, as it always eventually does, they build walls against the lava, buy back the ruined houses, and begin again. The question that hangs over this island is not how people survive here. It is stranger than that. Why do the people living on the planet's most restless ground refuse, absolutely refuse, to live anywhere else? On the map, Iceland floats alone in the North Atlantic, just brushing the Arctic Circle, closer to Greenland than to the Europe it belongs to. But the map lies about what this place actually is. Iceland is not standing on the Earth, it is standing in it. The island is the one place where the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, the planet's longest mountain range, hidden underwater, rises above the waves. Here, the North American plate and the Eurasian plate pull away from each other, and the island exists only because molten rock keeps rising to fill the gap. At Ingvellir, you can walk through the rift itself, a canyon with America on one wall and Europe on the other. The consequences are everywhere. Around 30 volcanic systems lace the island. Geysers throw boiling water at the sky on a schedule. Waterfalls the size of city blocks, Gullfoss, Dettifoss, thunder off the edges of lava plateaus. In the south, glaciers cap active volcanoes, ice and fire stacked directly on top of each other like an argument the island never settles. And scattered across this violence, neat farms, bright-roofed towns, greenhouse villages glowing in the winter dark. Fewer than 400,000 people share the whole island, one of the emptiest countries in Europe by land, and one of the calmest by any measure of daily life. How does a society become this peaceful on ground this violent? The answer begins more than 1,000 years ago, with people who arrived to find the margin of the world and decided to stay anyway. Consider what settlement actually meant here. The first generation arrived to an island with birch scrub, driftwood, and no going back. The boats that brought them were often broken up for building material. Within a century they had consumed most of the forest, and Iceland became what it remains, a country that builds without timber, farms without grain in most eras, and learned to count wealth in sheep, fish, and stories. The medieval assembly met each summer not only to make law, but to trade, marry, and settle feuds. The entire nation's business conducted in a lava field, in the open air, because there was no hall large enough and no king to build one. The settlers came in open boats in the 9th century, Norse farmers and the Celtic people they brought with them, to an island with no native population at all. Everything human here arrived by sea and started from zero. What they built, in the year 930, was remarkable. The Erlingi, an assembly of chieftains meeting in the open air at Ingvellir, in that same rift between continents, to argue law without a king. Icelanders count it among the oldest parliaments on earth, and the choice of venue says everything. The nation was founded, literally, on the crack, in the world. The centuries that followed were a masterclass in endurance. Little wood, short summers, and a sky that regularly turned lethal. In 1783, the Laki fissure opened and poured out poison and ash for months. The famine that followed killed a fifth of the population and darkened skies across Europe. Iceland's history does not have wars the way other nations do. It has eruptions, and the eruptions were enough. Out of that came a culture with two defining possessions. The first was the word. Through the darkest centuries, Icelanders wrote and recited the sagas, family epics of settlement, feud and fate, keeping a golden age alive on vellum while living in turf huts. To this day the language has changed so little that schoolchildren can read 800-year-old manuscripts. The second was each other. On an island where a bad winter could end a family, cooperation was not a virtue, it was equipment. Then, in the 20th century, the poorest corner of Europe pulled off a quiet miracle. Independence from Denmark in 1944. The fishing fleet modernised, and crucially, the islanders stopped fighting their geology and started hiring it. Culture rides the same geothermal current. Iceland publishes more books per person than nearly anywhere, and the December tradition of the Jólabókaflóð, the Christmas book flood, sees the entire nation exchange books on the holiday eve and read into the night. The descendants of the saga writers never stopped writing. The phone book once famously listed novelists by the dozen, and every second Icelander seems to be in a band, a choir, or a film crew between shifts. Every morning, across Iceland, hot water arrives in taps and radiators, having never touched a boiler. It comes from the ground, pumped from volcanic aquifers and piped across lava fields into cities. The numbers are unlike anywhere else on Earth. About 9 in 10 Icelandic homes are heated geothermally. Geothermal sources cover roughly 65% of the country's total energy use, and all of its electricity is renewable, about a third from geothermal steam, the rest from glacial rivers spinning turbines. When Reykjavik's sidewalks stay clear in a blizzard, it is because warm water is circulating beneath the pavement, the Volcano, on municipal duty, melting snow. This is the great Icelandic bargain. The same heat that can erase a town also runs the economy. Greenhouses glow through the polar night, growing tomatoes and cucumbers at the latitude of Alaska. Data centers park themselves on the island for the cheap, clean power. Even the country's most famous spa, the Blue Lagoon, is runoff, mineral-rich water from the neighbouring geothermal plant, turned milky blue and world-famous. And then there is the pool. Nearly every town, down to a few hundred residents, maintains a heated outdoor swimming complex open year-round, hot tubs at 40 degrees under falling snow. Swimming is a compulsory school subject. The pool is where Iceland actually socialises, gossips and argues politics, half submerged in volcano water. The old ingenuity survives alongside the engineering. At Laugarvatn, bakers still mix dark rye dough, seal it in pots, and bury it in the steaming black sand by the lake. A full day later, the earth returns Verabráu, hot spring bread, dense, sweet, and baked by the planet. No oven involved, exactly as it has been done since settlement times. Life on the volcano is comfortable now. Startlingly comfortable. Iceland sits at or near the top of global rankings for safety, equality and trust. It is also among the most expensive places in Europe to live. An island where nearly everything but heat and fish must be imported. Icelanders shrug at the prices the way they shrug at the wind. But comfort on this island is always provisional. Everyone knows the arrangement can be revoked without notice, and in November 2023, for one town on the southwestern peninsula, it was. The Reykjavik Peninsula, southwest of the capital, had been volcanically silent for about 800 years. Airports, power plants and fishing towns grew up on its lava fields the way cities grow on floodplains, trusting the quiet. In 2021, the quiet ended. For 2 years, eruptions stayed scenic, fissures opening in empty valleys, tourists hiking to watch. Then, the magma moved under the town of Grindavik, home to 3,790 people. On the night of November 10th, 2023, the ground cracked beneath streets and houses, and the entire town was evacuated in hours. Weeks later, on January 14th, 2024, a fissure opened at the town's edge, and lava walked into the streets, taking homes as cameras watched. What happened next is the most Icelandic story ever told. The country did not abandon the peninsula, and it did not pretend the danger away. It engineered. Barriers of earth and rock, eventually stretching 14 kilometres, up to 25 metres high, were raised to steer the lava around the town and the power plant, and they largely worked. And when it became clear most residents could not return to homes on cracking ground, a government-chartered company simply bought them out, more than 950 houses, over 90% of the town. purchased so that families could rebuild their lives elsewhere without ruin. No mass casualties. No abandonment. No denial. A society the size of a mid-tier city absorbed the loss of an entire town, collectively, methodically, almost quietly. That is the Icelandic contract with the volcano, written in modern law. The fire may take the land, but it does not get to take the future. And that contract has an emotional clause too, because the same fire that takes is the fire that gives this island its unearthly face. Before the beauty, understand the intimacy. Iceland is small enough that nature is never scenery seen from a distance. It is a neighbour with keys to the house. Reykjavik's suburbs end, and the lava fields begin mid-street. A 20-minute drive from the Parliament puts you alone under a waterfall. The volcano that evacuated Grindaf glows, on eruption nights, visible from the capital's gas stations. Icelanders check aurora forecasts and eruption webcams with the same casual attention other nations give traffic reports. The intimacy breeds a particular competence. Most Icelanders can read weather the way sailors do, because the weather here has plot twists. The saying goes that if you dislike it, wait 5 minutes. Search and rescue is staffed by volunteers, thousands of them, in a country this size, who leave dinner tables to pull tourists out of rivers and storms, unpaid, as a matter of civic identity. The wilderness is everyone's backyard, and everyone shares responsibility for the fools who wander into it unprepared. Ask Icelanders who left why they came back, and the answers are rarely practical. They talk about light. Summer nights when the sun rolls along the horizon and never sets, and whole towns walk, golf, and paint their houses at midnight. Winter days of blue twilight when the aurora unspools green and violet over the rooftops, the sky performing over a country with almost no light pollution to dim it. They talk about the land itself, black sand beaches at Renisfjara, where basalt columns rise like organ pipes from the surf. Glacier lagoons where icebergs drift past the ring road. Highlands the colour of rust and moss, where you can drive an hour and meet no one. Landscapes so unearthly that space agencies have used them to rehearse for other planets. And they talk, sometimes with a smile, sometimes without, about the hidden people. Folklore holds that elves, the Huldufolk, live inside certain rocks and hills, and road projects have, on occasion, adjusted their plans rather than disturb a known elfstone. Foreign journalists love the story. Icelanders mostly let them have it, but underneath the wink is something serious, a 1,000-year-old habit of treating the land as inhabited, as someone, a landscape you negotiate with, not merely use. That habit may be the island's real religion. It is what connects the saga farmers to the geothermal engineers, to the families of Grindaf. The assumption that the earth here is alive, generous, and armed, and that all three facts must be respected at once. There is also the arithmetic of smallness itself. A nation of under 400,000 must staff a full civilization, courts, orchestras, air traffic control, a language's entire literature, from a talent pool smaller than a mid-sized city's. Icelanders answer with ferocious multi-competence. The police officer who is also a rescue volunteer and a novelist. The farmer running a guest house, a hydro turbine, and a horse breeding line. The National Genealogy Database reaches back to settlement, and one of its daily uses is famously practical, checking, before the second date, exactly how related you are. Smallness is the island's vulnerability, and its glue. Everyone is within 2 handshakes of everyone, which keeps both corruption and anonymity in short supply. Honesty requires the other column of the ledger. Living on the hot island is expensive. Imported goods, high wages chasing high prices, housing costs that squeeze the young in Reykjavik, where most of the country now lives. The economy, for all its energy miracles, still leans hard on 2 pillars, fish and tourism, and both can wobble. The island learnt that brutally in 2008, when its overgrown banks collapsed and nearly took the country's finances with them. Tourism itself is a double-edged glacier. Visitors arriving by the million fund the good life and crowd the fragile moss. The most famous sites now need ropes and rangers, where a decade ago there was only wind. And the ground has not finished talking. Scientists expect the Reykjanes fires, now awake, to flare on and off for decades. A rolling negotiation between magma and infrastructure on the country's most populated peninsula. Every Icelander lives with that forecast in the back drawer of the mind. They stay anyway. Emigration offers exist for every Icelander. A new adjacent passport, fluent English, in-demand skills. The remarkable statistic is how few take them permanently. The island keeps its people the way the rift keeps filling, continuously, against the odds. Looking back across the whole journey, the paradox of Iceland resolves into something almost logical. The volcano is not the enemy of this way of life. It is the author of it. The same restless ground that erased towns also heats the pools, bakes the bread, powers the greenhouses, and carved the scenery that no one who grows up here can quite leave behind. Iceland did not build paradise despite the volcano. It built paradise out of it, and pays the volcano's price in evacuations and barriers, and bought back houses whenever the bill arrives. Perhaps that is why life here feels so unusually honest. Nothing about the island lets you forget that comfort is borrowed, that ground is temporary, that warmth comes, literally, from the same source as ruin. Iceland is not just the waterfalls, the auroras, the black beaches, and the blue lagoons. It is a reminder that home was never about safe ground. It is about what people are willing to build and rebuild on the ground they love